Welcome, everyone. We are really thrilled that you're here to have a conversation with us, and we intend it to be exactly that, a conversation about what it takes to build a learning culture. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We welcome you to put questions, comments, ideas, suggestions into the chat box. So a lot of you are on webinars regularly. You know that, somebody talks for 50 minutes and then you do 10 minutes at the end of Q&A. We don't want to do that. So what we would like is, as you have a question, bring it up right in the moment while you're thinking of it, while it's still fresh, while you've got a great idea, and then we'll fire really hard questions at Frank, which is what I'm looking forward to. So um, and just a reminder that we will send a recording of this to you. So people always ask about this. Sometimes you have to leave a little early or whatever, but we'll get this to you, and it'll be in the next 24 hours. Um, I want to, well, introductions. My name is Jerry Zandstra, and I'm the Senior Director of Learning at Ingenuiti, and I get the opportunity to work with clients all over the world, and far more fun, I get to have interesting conversations with interesting people. And Frank, you are one of those interesting people. So I'm going to ask you, Frank, to give a little bit of your background, but if I can brag about you just a little bit, you can correct or improve whatever I say. So Dr. Frank Gonzalez is our panelist today. He teaches at Cornell. He's been involved in learning cultures at Yum Brands, at Taco Bell, at large health and human service organizations in Texas. He's been involved in a whole bunch of stuff. So, Frank, man, what a gift! Thank you for being with us, and thank you for giving us your time and your expertise. And add to my introduction whatever you like.
Dr. Jerry, well, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, especially those that are dialing in. Yes, you for taking the time out of your personal and professional busy days. Interesting folks. Wow. You set the bar really high. Let's lower it just a little bit so maybe I can try to meet it and or exceed it a little bit, my friend. Yes, I'm a
Okay.
people and culture executive, currently serving as a chief culture officer for Braum Brands. 2 decades, as you mentioned, in cross-industry experiences, health, insurance, banking, quick service restaurants, holding company, done some private consulting, and yes, I teach part-time at Cornell University, organizational design,
Hmm.
mindfulness, inclusive initiatives, etc. I'm using data-driven information design, information, inclusive initiatives, talent, end-to-end organizational development. Officially, yes, I'm Dr. Frank Gonzalez. Most people just call me Frank, Frankie G. That be me. I'm a father to a 7-year-old Robbie, husband to Liz of now 14 years. Consider myself a cultural architect. You have to build and rebuild and design. A people enthusiast, meaning that I have an altruistic kind of mindset in development of others. It's not about the thank yous and the high fives. As long as I can see folks grow, I really get personal fulfillment around that. My work has really been around relationship building models, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm very interested to looking forward to this conversation and trying to add value, my friend.
Yeah. One thing, well, lots of things stuck out in what you said, but one thing is that cultures don't just happen. They're built. They're actually created. And that implies intentionality and pathways and ideas and strategies and tactics, and those are the things we're going to get into today. So, just a little bit about Ingenuity, what we do. Four main service areas. We provide a lot of consulting services to mostly Fortune 1000 companies, but sometimes others, looking at needs analysis and gap analysis, curriculum mapping and planning, and a number of other things. We actually do the build, so we do the design and the development, mobile friendly e-learning, gamification, all sorts of things like that. We have a really good video production team and animation team. Translation is something that we have done for a long time at Ingenuity. We translate in over 200 languages, and we have translated now. We're like McDonald's, and the little sign used to change. If you remember that, Frank, like 42 billion or whatever. The number we keep using, although it gets bigger, is we've translated well over 1 billion words and well over 10,000 documents, courses, and so on. And then we do staff augmentation, which is those are mostly learning, training, and development professionals, and therefore companies that have a short-term need. We need somebody for 6 months that's really an expertise in this particular area in project management or instructional design, graphic design, and we place them in companies to help teams out for a little bit. So that's our little infomercial. Let's get to the fun stuff. So, Frank, it's hard to define a culture, right? Don't know if anybody's ever tried, but even, reminds me of like philosophy, 301 or whatever when you're in college and your professor says define this chair. And you think, well, of course I know what a chair is. But actually defining it is it turns out is really hard to do. And, annoying in the process. So what do we mean by a culture? What do we mean by a learning culture?
Jerry, there's a lot there, but let's simplify it. You're right. The pie in the sky is it's the DNA, it's the relics, the rituals, the routines, right? But it's really just how we show up. It's really
Hmm.
shifting our mindset from it being an event base to really embedded day to day. We're bragging about it, we're sharing it, we're
Hmm.
learning, we're growing. It's truly a daily fabric. It's anchored in a number of different things that I know we'll get into, right? But it's anchored around psychological safety, which there's a lot of assessments out there. There's also a lot of theology around there, right? But it's really about feeling safe to be able to learn and grow because you are going to make mistakes, right? So it's a combination of that psychological safety with the daily fabric. It's a bit of the shared values and mantras that we may have, regardless of where we're at in our professional career, right? And what
Hmm.
level we're at. And it's a little bit of that integration. That learning culture, there are some things around. There's the human nature, there's the culture on how we show up, and then it's the personality of both your organ or a combination of your organization, your leadership, your team, your function, your small team, and then you as an individual, right? Those things, those fabrics that were woven into the daily behaviors on how we show up. They do have
Yeah.
personality. So those are the things around culture. So it's not both, you know, positive or unfavorable or neutral, although we would love it to be more positive, right? Because that's where innovation and the business and the bottom line really come from. But it's none of those. That's how you architect that. So you create structure and framework so that people have freedom within that because I will say I did say by relics and routines, so we are very routine based creatures, and that's that piece right there. How can you
Yeah.
create that framework for the routinization of your organization on how we show up consistently? Yeah,
You
I said
use
a
the word
lot there, so let's
we.
unpack that.
You did. You use the word we. I heard you use the word I once at the end of a whole bunch of we's, right?
Nah.
And the we component of it of a culture.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've got a bunch of sort of radical individualists who are disconnected from everybody, and there is no we. But I always notice
Mhm.
when I hire somebody,
Mhm.
when their language shifts from you to we, something, and
Mhm.
they don't even notice it. They don't even hear it. They right, all of it, something changed. They internalized something. Something
Mhm.
became part of them. So I think that we I thing is a healthy distinguishing characteristic because I'm going to celebrate things. I'm going to achieve. I'm going to. That's a very different thing than we're going to, um, and we're going to celebrate. We're going
Mhm.
to achieve.
All right.
Take that into learning culture. So we've kind of generically described culture itself, but and before you do, I want to tell you a little story. A number of years ago, I was at a really cool conference in Aspen, Colorado. It was led by Simon Sinek. It was 15 people. It was C-suite executives from around the world, and me, right? Don't be me. So there I am, like learning from all these people. But the cool thing happened the night before we got there. There was this huge storm, so I drove through from Denver Airport to Aspen, and this big storm, and a bunch of trees went down. And in the morning, I went to look out at the trees because I live in the woods. I'm kind of a woods guy, and it was the weirdest thing. These trees had tipped over. The wind had pushed them over, but there was no root ball. There was no big thing. I didn't know how aspen trees worked. I didn't realize that there are one. Do you have aspen trees in Texas?
We do not, my friend. So I'm a
Okay, I
little
didn't
bit
think you
of
did. Yeah. I'm just picturing like weeds blowing down the street. But anyway, sorry for those of you from Texas, but you go look where the tree was, there's just a hole in the ground. So I get back, I'm researching and like, where's the root ball? Well, it turns out there isn't one. There's a giant system underground. So when you look at an aspen grove, it's all one living organism. And all of a sudden I thought, well, that's, I think, what a culture is. It's this underground. It's not always expressed. It's not always known. And what you see is the trees, but the trees are just little parts of the org. You can have the largest, some of the largest organisms in the world are actually aspen groves. What you see is just, you don't see the vast majority of the tree. There's underground all of this organizational stuff that's either healthy or not healthy. And that determines what the little shoots do, which we call trees. So what's a learning culture?
I love to attack or approach this in both the research piece of it and then the practicality, if you may, my friend. So research, and this is, and some of y'all may know, but the meta-analysis around learning in general, right? So meta-analysis, the study of studies, and this has not changed over the years.
Hmm.
But as you design and deliver how you want folks to show up, you can make it mandatory and the good old compliance, right? That compliance feel.
Mhm. It's
Or you
enjoy
can
your
make it
class, right?
voluntary, my friend, right? And they
Yeah.
both have, it's a double-edged sword. They both have their pros and their opportunities. The pro with mandatory is that in general, we will master the objectives because there will be some sort of woven in assessment, behavioral testing, right? That says, yes, these three objectives, you will do this, this, and this. How you want people to think, feel, and do differently. Yes, I mastered it. Boom, boom, boom. Here's the test, right? But it tends
Yes.
to, here's the opportunity though, then it falls off, right? And that's where a lot of us have seen in learning culture and experiences, as you mentioned, and the kickoff of this. The other side
Yeah.
of it is the involuntary. And the research says with voluntary, your objectives, and this is where it kind of collides with business outcomes a bit, you may not always necessarily master every one of those objectives of the intention and the design delivery of what you're trying to offer and the framework you're trying to offer, but you will master long term the essence of what you're trying to deliver. And that's so which more is more important? And I know we'll
Mm,
also get into C-suite buy-in. That's the conversation you have to have as part of your needs analysis. Are we trying to do this long term? Or are we trying to do this short term? Do you want to be compliant or do you want them to be consistent when it comes to culture? And that is kind of the hardest conversation. Sounds easy. The drop down to that, and I did say I versus we. The I
mhm.
element is before we show up on these learning culture experiences, I have to get past this project management, what's in it for me, WIIFM, resistant to change it comes to that
Sure.
culture, right? And
Yeah.
there are assessments on this, and that's kind of getting the landscape of your organization, but also yourself. We're
Yeah.
resistant because we're routine seekers, as I mentioned before. We're resistant because we're short-term focused. We're programmed to be that way. Everything is by day or
Let
by
me interrupt you there, Frank. Do you
quarter.
mean we're as individuals wired or that
Yes.
organizations, because if you're you
No.
know
Well,
you've been
both.
in a corporate world, right? Publicly traded corporations have a
Yeah.
whopping 3 months at a time. That's how they think. It's how their finances work. You mean both?
I mean both, Jerry. I'm talking about the individual right now, but I did
Okay.
mention before that your organization takes on a personality as well. So when you
Yeah.
say I, that can also be the organization. But right now, specific, I'm talking about as an individual. But
Okay.
it is woven in a bit into the organization, I'll mention that. But this resistance, right, is routine as an individual, and we talk about growth versus non-growth, safe zones, things like that, right? That learning
Yep.
culture. So you have to keep that in mind when it comes to the design. Is that folks
Yeah.
are routine, but I'm about to break the routine so that we can be consistent and so that we can learn and grow together. I got to
Yeah.
keep that in mind. I'm routine seeker. I'm a routine seeker as a
I
human,
love routine. My whole
right?
life
We all do.
routine.
There's
I can't. If you
coffee,
mess with my
right? You
routine,
got
Frank, we're gonna have a problem. I mean,
right.
that's right.
We love routines
Yeah.
and we want to explore with our safe zone in that routine. And that's how
Yeah.
we nudge, right? So it can be
Okay.
drastic. We're
Right.
short-term focused because yes, we're built on by quarters. We're programmed
Yeah.
that way individually because of our organization, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are very rigid in our experiences.
Yeah.
We base everything based on our experiences. And this is just as we learn and grow in and around when we hit 30 years old. And for some of us, and that's just the general, that's based on research.
Yep.
Sometimes it can hit up to 40 years old, but we're very rigid. And we about 60% of what we want to learn intrinsically is already there. And so we
Okay.
always go back to this kind of foundation I'm just going to base it on my experiences. And then we're also very emotional creatures. We're
Okay.
emotional, and it's more than the Brene Brown's emotional
Yeah.
triad, and she
Yeah.
mentions in her research that we can identify happy, mad, and sad, the dirty triad. But there's so many more emotions to that.
Oh
So when you're
yeah.
designing,
Lots of shades.
delivering learning experiences, you have to tap into the Disney effect of storytelling and experiences because there's so many other emotions. And that's what will drive those learning experiences, right? So that
Okay.
resistance to change as individual. And if I may, this will be a little bit more shorter, the organizational piece of it. So the organizational, as we show up as a group, the one book that I reference so much, and even in my own research, and I actually use it to frame strategies around cross-brand industries and especially multicultural industries and organizations. And I've used this time and time again. It is Hofstede's software of the mind. And
Can
software of
you
the mind, yeah, I'm gonna put this in the
yeah,
if you
thank you.
may,
Just
my
stick it in
friend.
chat so
I'm gonna
everybody can
stick it in
see
the
it.
chat. I want our folks here to walk away with some resources here. There's two
Okay.
versions of it. There's the geek out research version of it, which I love, but this one is the more field handbook version of
Okay.
it. And it's updated constantly. And it talks about, I'll simplify the entire book, but there's so much in there that you have to unpack. There's
Okay.
human nature, there is culture, and then there's personality on top of it. Little triangle there. There's
Interesting.
both what's learned, and then there's both what's inherited. And that's how you can approach an organization. Because the drop down to that as the book and it the research behind it is it's over 3 decades. You take
Hmm.
both profit and nonprofit, 90 geographical areas around the world, senior
Really?
leadership, CEOs, number of different folks, and they
Okay.
report on their personal values or what
Hmm.
they think their values are, and it's aggregated all the way up into their organization. And then there's this kind of aspirational. So it's how you show up and how you want to show up and kind of the differences between the two. But it drops down to behaviors, performance, assertiveness, vision, humanity, how
Yeah.
collective we are. And that's what you were talking about, or
Yeah.
great call out on me, the I versus we. How
Yeah.
collective are you in your mindset,
Yeah.
right? Distance and power. Oh, Jerry,
Yeah.
whoa, hold on. You're my boss. Therefore, I'm not going to
Right.
give you any inputs. Therefore, culture, is it a learning culture if I can't give you inputs and
Right.
insights of what I'm learning? No,
Yeah.
or we have to almost unpack that because it's an inherited culture I already have based on where I'm from, the language I speak, and multi-generation linguistics,
Yeah.
that's been
Oh
programmed
yeah.
into us.
Oh yeah.
And even
And that
uncertainty.
matters. Yep.
Uncertainty, Jerry. That
Yep.
that big part of, do I what workshop, how am I going to approach this? Am I really willing to try new things? It
Right.
measures all those different things and puts it in clusters,
Yeah.
right? And you can actually, there's a map online that you can look at this, and they are statistical differences that you can measure and say, okay, this is where you partner with human resources. Where generally are the demographics coming from? Use that data and help influence your cultural strategy and learning.
Yeah.
But I'll drop
And
this down and end here, my friend, if I may.
yeah.
It also has a more, that's kind of the organization and behaviors of your people, but it even just kind of levels back one more time and talks about leadership behaviors in general. So are you participative, team oriented, charismatic, and building? Are you humane? Do you like to build autonomy? Are you
Yeah.
self-protective, which is also a leadership model, right? How
Yeah. It is.
protective you are and kind of owning things or sharing. But the top three have always been participative, charismatic, and team oriented. Those three. And if you
Yeah.
can measure your cultural learning, and every time you design and deliver something and you oversee those things, you do those top three, those are global. Those are global, my friend.
Yeah. Cross-cultural.
Hmm.
Yeah. Wendy, just to answer your question, the link is right above there. It's Culture, Organizations, and Software of the Mind
Hmm.
is the name of the book. So, Frank, we're gonna change topics a little bit. One of the one of the great frustrations of L&D people is that the C-suite is where good ideas go to die. Sorry if any of you are in the C-suite, but right, they're often most protective, most they're looking hard at ROI, and you know what? That's what the shareholders pay them to do. You know, they're studying and trying to figure out where to get efficiencies, and so and they're on the clock. They're on a quarterly basis, right? One of the I used to teach economics. One of the failures is encouraging companies to think 3 months at a time because you could do a lot of damage 3 months at a time thinking. So you have people who don't really understand learning. They're looking for ROI. They want things to move fast. They usually, this is a caricature, but usually what happens is they have a problem that they try to fix six other ways. Then they decide this is a learning problem, right?
Hmm.
And they throw some, big bucket of goo at the learning team and go, "You guys fix it." How do you get their buy? And that's not always true. Sometimes there are, people in the C-suite who are incredible, visionary, long-term thinking, and so on. But the last stat I saw was the average CEO in a publicly traded company lasts like 3.8 years. That's not a great number. How do you get their buy-in when you're trying to change a thing that's hard to measure, get them to think long term, get them to think about investing in their people? How do you do that? I mean, we know it's critical, right? They control the resources, right? And how do you get them to do, how have you gotten them to do that?
I'll say here's a mantra or a kind of a theme. You got to get executive alignment as a multiplier. And what does that mean? You have to have your most senior leadership walk the talk. You have to offer the tactics to translate those KPIs in telling a story. You have to pilot things. You have to show them the successes and really use learning and cultural learning experiences as the steward to those financial outputs as you talked about. What
It's not
I've
always
done,
easy to connect
and
those
it's not,
things,
it's
right?
easier
It's
said
not.
than done.
Yeah.
Part of that is, and I will say, is that when you level set or re-level set with your most senior leadership and ask for specific examples of how they steward their own learning, share it, develop, and
Mm,
grow, that will give you the greatest insight on, because even with
Interesting.
C-suite, the general turnover is anywhere from 3 to 5 years, or depending on the type of organization, right? So you
Yeah.
can still measure and say, so you got all the strategy. And I've done that both as a candidate or as a consultant, being in-house or as a consultant.
Yeah.
Tell me about your learning strategy to go with all these financial outputs. Oh, well, what do you
Yeah.
mean by that? What does that mean? What do you mean by that? So, Jerry, and let's just say you're CEO, Jerry. Jerry, when was the last time you learned something new, and what did you learn from it? How did you share it with your organization or your team? Uh, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big red flag right there, Jerry. You're not going to intrinsically change that person. So I want to be completely honest and transparent with people, right? So, folks, I'm never going to lie to you. Okay. So let's just be honest. Now, the folks
Well,
that at least
let's make it at least the most challenging version of it, not a
okay.
binary yes or no, right?
Yeah.
Whoever that person is, that's you're climbing Mount Everest.
Let me see. Oh, sorry. I was going to share the map of what I was talking about, the globe, with everyone as well.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
The challenging part is those that at least pause and or are interested, the scale of it. Okay. And so what do I mean by that? So those leaders that, I do
Yeah.
value learning. I do
Hmm.
value the cultural experiences of my organization. And they either hesitate or, hey, they're like, CEO Jerry's like, I actually just finished a course on this, or I did a LinkedIn learning on here, or,
Right.
this is considered learning right here, pausing in your personal, professional, busy life and listening
Yeah.
to us to talk about these
Yeah.
strategies, and then
Yeah.
implementation and execution tactics, right? I learned this, I took away this, and then sharing it, right? The scale of it. Two experiences that I've had that I think kind of tackle both is one organization that I worked with. I asked the CEO that as part of my onboarding, I was able to be at that seat. Now, if you're not at that seat or that table or that room, that's fine. Ask your most senior leader in your function
Mm.
or do a couple of skip levels and ask, right? But I was able to. And this CEO was huge on e-learning. Oh, I love
Huh.
e-learning. I've got Coursera, I've got this, I've got that, I've got everything is, I pay
Wow.
for it. I make sure that our financial officer, accounts for it, this and that. Okay. So
Wow.
he
Okay.
kind of hesitated and he was with that, right? So I said, so how does that then cascade or trickle down to your everyday person?
Hmm.
And the scale of rewarding and or recognizing those that do take action. Again, going
Yeah.
way back to when I was talking about the meta-analysis on voluntary learning. And that was the biggest challenge. And how we got over that is working with total rewards, working with HR partners, working with
Hmm.
business leader functions, getting the buy-in from CEO, like, okay, yeah, I paid for it, but that's just stagnant right here. How do I then cascade it down and reward and or recognize folks on it? Great. Sometimes it was just simple recognition, kudos,
Yeah.
right? Things that were mentioned in meetings. Hey, what was
Yeah.
who last learned something? Hey, take the realm, whether virtual or live, in our next meeting, share those first 5 minutes, last 5 minutes of our meeting, what you learned, take away how we can put this in action. That very, very kind of thing that we beautifying the basics, right? Around that piece of it that
Yeah.
a lot of us
Yeah.
know about, but we don't
Yeah.
actually execute on. I think the other one
Yeah.
was a very challenging kind of example of that kind of buy-in, where it was actually our head of technology, so our chief technology officer at one of the bigger enterprises that I worked with. Now you're talking about 36,000 corporate employees and a
Yeah.
million plus frontline employees. Wow. The mantra of our organization was people development. Okay, that's just an aspirational goal.
Yeah.
But your chief technology officer was the one saying, we're going to use AI, we're going to use this, we're going to use that. And I'm thinking in this town hall meeting, okay, how does that factor into cultural learning and learning experiences and driving that piece of it? Hmm. When you talk about C-suite buy-in, it's sometimes, Jerry, using their own words
Yeah.
for the better good is what I'll say. So I found an opportunity at the next C-suite off-site to put them through a 1 hour AI training. where they use their own goals because every C-suite member has to have goals. They use
Mm.
their own goals and personality profiles and all just a really interactive experience to incorporate AI and utilize it so that they know it and they feel it. And I use
Right.
the chief technology officer's words kind of against them and say they
Yeah.
want AI to be part of our future, integrated in our business. You all need to be the stewards of that and getting that
Right.
buy-in and make it fun for them. Because guess what, folks? C-suite, everything's so, kind
It
of,
is.
hey, it's so tightened up, buttoned up. You sometimes they want to let loose, and they had so much fun with it, Jerry. You went
Yeah.
from this really tight boardroom area kind of feel, right?
Yeah.
Very, to like, wow, this is cool. And this is, oh, hey, let's put it on our phone. Let's put it on our laptop. Let's do this. Let's do that. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And that learning experience around there. And so that at the next town hall, Jerry, that's what they talked about. I want everybody to do that now and this and
Right. They had an
sharing that
experience.
piece of it. Scale was the biggest challenge. You're talking about a
Yeah.
million plus folks. Started with
Yeah.
C-suite. The next part was a town hall. The next thing was at the any kind of integrated learning opportunity was factoring in and weaving in that piece. But you can do that not just with AI. I think with anything
Yeah.
is you have
Yeah.
to, and if you're not doing it, somebody's got to do it. But take ownership, see that problem, own
Yeah.
it, and cascade it down. And that
And
those
then
are two challenges. Yeah.
when you're having the budget discussion, right? They've actually experienced that you're making your job easier. I think, we've got on the slide here, speak their language. I think, L&D people are really enthusiastic, right? You want to see people grow. You want to see people grow in their skills and their knowledge and their abilities and their buy-in and their culture. We use our language
Mm,
and we don't understand. But if you sit in a room with CEOs, and again, a different conference, but I used to get invited several years in a row of a CEO only. CEOs of publicly traded companies globally that met in different places in Europe. But to hear these people talk about their lives and the pressures, and I mean, right, we all look at their salaries and go, wow, must be nice. True, no doubt. But the beating they take, right, and the pressure that comes from everybody
right.
want something. Everybody's looking for something from you. And so everybody's trying to get the CEO to understand them. And I'm not sure how often we're actually taking the time to understand the C-suite priorities, their strategic initiatives, their language. And I can tell you, I wasn't a CEO. I was sitting in a room with 75 CEOs. There were parts of the conversation I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. I didn't know their language. So I think
Right,
those are really big things. And I think the last thing you had here, just to point it out, data and stories, data and stories.
right.
Data, right? Data tells a story, no doubt. But if you have data only, your CFO is going to be really happy, maybe nobody else. Right. But when you combine it with narrative and you bring that together, you could tell a full orbed
Mm,
story that's in their language,
mm,
supporting what's important to do for them to do.
mhm. Absolutely.
So I want to go to Bruce here. Bruce has a comment, and it ends with "er," so you could tell how the comment's going to go. I'm a firm believer in you put a good person in a bad system, and the system wins every time. I agree with that. How do I work with my leadership team? And the fact that they don't see this as a problem is the problem. Let's fix this,
Mm.
the frontline thing, and keep bad supervisors in their current position. I
Uh-huh.
I I I
Uh-huh.
don't I don't know. I don't think an individual 99 out of 100 times triumphs over a really rotten system. I
Yeah,
think we become
100%.
the thing, right? It's Pirates of the Caribbean, part of the crew, part of the ship, and you become that thing. How do you? What happens when you get in, Frank, and you go, "This is just awful. This whole thing is awful." How do
Yeah.
you address that?
And don't let my smile fool you, right? There's always yes, I have been in some situations where there's the fun Frank, and then I become like, hmm. So
Yeah,
Bruce, I hear you, and then you were double clicked by Jay, and I put a little kind of quote or kind of a on-air thing that you can say, right? If it's not linked to strategy, it's good. It's just a nice to have. I think what we've been discussing or what I've been sharing so far is the behavioral piece of it. The other part is the structural,
Yeah.
right? And so coming into an organization within that first 30 to 60 days, and actually I broke my own record, one of my most recent organizations. I did it within a week. How I did it was having those conversations, right? A listening tour, but I have very, very intentional pointed questions. Let's connect for a little bit. Tell me what's working, what's not. So it's kind of still a needs analysis, right?
Hmm.
And I probe a little bit. And what I'm asking for is not just how people show up currently. What is the structural insights or reinforcements
Hmm.
or derailers that are making them unsuccessful? And then I come up with themes that go along with the strategy, right? And one of the most popular ones that I've used, and there's combinations of them. There's Deloitte. There's also Corn Ferry. I'll pick on Corn Ferry for a minute. They're all very similar on those strategies,
Hmm.
frameworks that I'll say that you can kind of plug and play and use the language of your organization. But Corn Ferry specifically, I love that one because you can actually then, as Jerry, you're telling me, or I'll pick on Bruce for a bit because he mentioned it, and thank you for that, Bruce. I'd like to put everything on a scale so everything can be measured. So we talk about a one, which is basic structure. Are we talking about a two, kind of emerging? Are we talking about a three or four, talking about leading and or owning this structural piece of it? And I'll quadruple click on what I'm talking about. But in general, there are verticals around that can be infused into the cultural piece of it and see where your current state is. Because sometimes, again, Jerry, you mentioned being in a room full of CEOs. If you don't have a one pager, if you don't just have a one infographic, you lost them. Because I mean, when they say time
Yeah.
is money, if you've ever seen a CEO
Simplicity.
schedule,
Yeah.
wow,
Clarity.
they don't even have time to breathe sometimes. I literally had a CEO tell me one time, I didn't have time for lunch or to go to have a bio break today. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's usually their day, right? They're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
one thing after another, right? So that attention span is even less because of the
Yeah.
business impacts and pulls and
Yep.
pushes.
Communicate
But
quickly and clearly.
exactly, but communicate quickly and get and kind of land the plane. But the,
Yeah.
the verticals around the cultural piece of it and strategy,
Yeah.
again, using one through four, right? Or you could do one through five, but you want to start
Yep.
really small scale of it, not one through 10, only if it's sensitive enough. One through four. Start with a one through four, right? One not being great, four being, oh, you got it. But it's divided into verticals of marketing,
Yeah.
operations, risk governance, right? Awareness, which is what we've been talking a lot about, or behavioral or learning, that piece of it, and then your talent piece of it. If you can frame it in those verticals and then scale it, and then of course they're always going to say, well, where'd you get this information? You have to find ways to be able to measure that. Some of it's through
Mhm.
conversation and you kind of develop it
Yeah.
like I did within a week, or you add to it as well and make it very, very adaptable to that.
Yeah.
If you can present that in a one pager to your most senior leadership and say, wow, why are we at a bunch of ones and twos when it comes to our
Hmm.
risk governance? Well, we have
Hmm.
exposures even when it comes to our culture. I
Yeah.
can go talk really bad about my brand right now, and you don't think it's a big deal until it hits media the way it does nowadays through social
Right.
channels, right?
Yeah.
That's an exposure. That's
Yeah.
risk. That's risk governance. And then you have to the old HR thing, you have to see where the policies, procedures, platforms, and people that back up those structural pieces. So Bruce,
Yeah.
that I mean that's kind of my we could do a whole workshop, I think, on strategy, but you have to incorporate the structural pieces of it. Yeah.
I would add to that too, Frank. So one of my good friends is a guy named Bob Chapman. He's the CEO of Barry Waymiller, a $3.5 billion a year manufacturing company that is private. If and I've had him on, some of you may have been on that. I've had him on a webinar before. He's got a wonderful book called Everybody Matters. But if Bob were in this conversation, Bob would say, shine a bright light, Bruce, on the good things. Everybody's going to shine a bright light on the lousy things, right? Everybody knows what everybody takes, you got the one spotlight. I'm going to look at the problem. And what Bob would channeling Bob for what Bob would say is in every organization, there's some bright lights somewhere. Um, and highlight, put a big bright light on those guys. I want to shift structurally away in our conversation, Frank, from C-suite and buy-in to, right? Those are structural things. Now we're going to move into the learning component because you could have a great structure and really lousy learning, right? And you're going to end up in the same spot. You
100%.
right. You got to end up with this. We called this the heartbeat, didn't we? Right,
Yeah, yeah.
igniting learner engagement. So why is engagement non-negotiable? And then go where you want with that, and then some strategies on how to actually engage learners because non-engaged engaging learning isn't going to go anywhere.
A couple of quotes that are still memorable over 2 decades with me. One is from Bob Pike's Learning, if you ever subscribe to that. It's to train is to entertain, or to lower the tension is to raise retention. So you have to it does have to be a balance of fun and then what are your objectives, right? So
Mm,
that's what it means. But if I may, I'll share a quick story with you. I
mhm.
You're name dropping all over the place, Jerry. So I got to tap into your network. But let me tell you, my
If
friend,
if you if you asked either one of those guys, they go, I have no idea who that is. Right? They wouldn't know me.
I know
No,
all the
that's
people
not
you're
true.
talking about. I do, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
But let
I've
me.
had the opportunity to hang out with some people that are way more interested
Pretty
than
cool,
me.
Pete. Yeah. Well, you
Yep,
mentioned Simon Sinek at the beginning. I'm like, wow, Simon, I like that stuff. Right. He's got
that
a
was
great
cool.
way of framing things. And one of the
Yes, he
folks
does.
that I got to meet over 2 decades ago, and mind you, at the time I was an instructional both designer and delivery. So I was still up and coming in a number of different things. And I want you to picture a room. This is when I was still with Health and Human Services. It's a workforce of 60,000 people at the time. I'm in a room full of some leaders, um, instructional designers at all level, delivery. You've got academy directors and managers. I mean, just a number of different folks at about 100 plus folks in this room. One of the things that I was really wonderful is they would always invest in us. And some of the hardest folks to train are trainers. So train the trainer session. And we had a workshop with the co-author of Telling Ain't Training, right? And that was Dr. Harold Stolovich. And he was all, there was this pre-game thing. Folks are coming into the room, right? Got a little light music. The lighting is great. And he's making his way around. We start right on time. And in the first 10 minutes, Jerry, he went around the room and had not only everybody's name memorized. By the way, nope, no name tags, by the way. He had everybody's name memorized. He also mentioned at least one thing he learned about that person. And that was within the first 15 minutes before the workshop had even started. Okay. And he took us through all these different experiences and ways to really create an experience, memorable moments for your workshops, whether it's a quick micro learning all the way to a multi-day workshop, or train the trainer, like ways to do that. And I asked him, I still have an autographed book from him. I asked him, I said, you know, Harold, you're not saying anything I haven't said any before. And how
Yeah.
do you do what you do? And he started with a very biblical quote and said, you know what, Frank? No one is a prophet in their own land.
Mm,
Again, no one is a prophet in their own land. And if you can weave that into your experiences and fun and lowering friction around your experiences, because it comes up from time to time. What does that really mean for us that have never heard that? And it means that a person's talents, ideas, their accomplishments, and all these different things are not fully appreciated by those that they know best. And that comes within the organization. And so it's an absolute must. It's a lane. It's not a lane, it's a highway when it comes to this piece. So for me personally, when I'm challenging designers and then those that are delivering, I let them
mm,
know you've got to take frequent breaks. You got to commercialize your experiences, meaning that, well, for those of us that still have commercials on our TV stream, uh, every few
Oh,
minutes
I see. I
there's
was going a different way.
right, no,
Okay.
no
So you
commercial,
you
like a commercial,
mean,
right?
yeah, 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 I got you. I
You've got
got
a
you.
little
Okay.
bit of nuggets of stuff, and you should really not be talking more than 5 minutes, and then you lose people's
Right.
attention. So you got to come up with a kinetic activity. And then there's the commercial in between the segments of your show or event or something you're watching on television. The commercialization piece is that you get everything you need to know and have that implanted in you. And you're almost so willing to go buy whatever product's being sold to you or event or anything within 2 minutes or less.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing when it comes to
I,
engagement is you have to
so
commercialize that. Yeah.
I used to a guy that I worked with a number of years ago came up with the word larketing, which I absolutely hated because first of all, you made up a word, but I couldn't come up with a better one. But he meant learning and marketing, right? Taking lessons learned. And by the way, if you teach this in Cornell, trademarked, you have to reference me, even though I hate the term. But the idea of taking the principles
Noted.
of marketing, right? You're not going to use it. But taking the attention getting components of marketing and learning how to put that into your learning, marketing. The idea is pretty compelling. That can go too far. This was highly entertaining, didn't learn a thing, right? But I hardly ever see it go too far. I usually see it on the other end of the spectrum where it's you didn't learn anything from marketing and this isn't entertaining at all. This is drudgery, right? Yeah, I want to I just want to check the comments here. Some good
Yeah, a lot of
comments from
activity coming on
Bruce
Rob.
and
Yep, I
Rob.
see it.
Thanks for that.
Bruce. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, talent ain't training, that's for sure. And some of those things have been around a long time. Just in the interest of time, Frank, I want to move on to the next slide because again, if you can't identify and overcome obstacles, because it's the constant
Mhm.
frustration of people in our industry, and it's the constant frustration of everybody who's ever stood in a classroom, whether it's kindergarten or a PhD, right? You've
Mhm.
got great plans, but you're doing it in the context of a whole bunch of obstacles. So, we've got in here building a learning culture is change management, right? Which you've already talked about. And Frank, yeah, culture change equals resistance. If you're going to teach me something, chances are I probably have to unlearn something. And I really don't want to unlearn something because I'm 61 years old and it's taken me a while to learn this. And now you're asking me to change. There's lots of reasons for that, but all of it comes with fairly predictable roadblocks. So what I'd like you to do is just focus on, the common obstacles. I'm too busy.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
need this. How does it affect me? I don't want to change.
Mhm.
And then and it's kind of what Bruce brought up before, insufficient managerial or C-suite support.
Mhm.
Um, we know what those are. Walk us through some of the strategies to navigate some of those.
This one I'll keep simple because yeah, you're right. I've mentioned quite a few things. I put that resistance and focusing on the resistance. So that's almost the end in mind. Oh, I've got this. I've done a needs analysis. I want to be able to deliver this. These are the objectives. These are the experience. I'm going to incorporate a little bit of the fun, like Frank said, all those kinds of things. But actually reverse that and be very realistic with the organization, but be realistic with humans, which is you want to focus in on what is it for them. So very, very much about role. And I hear that, and I've seen that even in my most recent evaluations when delivering workshops is focusing on the role as specific as you can. And if it's too general, then perhaps that's a breakout group that you need individually or a smaller cohort, right? So you have to focus in on what's in it for them, the WIAFM, very
Yep.
personal gamification still. And even though, Jerry, you say you don't like games and maybe it's generational, that's not true. If you gamify it in the right way with the right platforms, gamification still works, I believe. But you
Oh,
have to,
I agree. It does as
right?
long as there's something behind it. And I'll tell you this, Frank,
Purpose. Yep.
again, it's a generational thing. I don't like books with pictures in them. I like books with words, right? And that's
Uh,
part of what I come out of. But I can't look at everybody and go, why do you need all these dumb animations?
right.
Right?
Right.
that's a mistake.
Exactly. And that's when you it's still incorporated into the design pieces of it that it has to
Yeah,
be through conversation. We're still humanistic. And
yeah.
the greatest obstacle around resistance, and there's a research that I can quote, it's Quinga 2022, 2021, I believe. And the researcher investigator actually looked at the influences on decreasing resistance to change. And the biggest significant driver around that was connection. So driving connection
Okay.
in whatever experience that you're trying to deliver with
You
acknowledging, of
mean the
course,
why? You're getting to the why, connecting the activity that I'm
no,
seeking with the
literally
reason, or what do you mean?
connecting you to others in the room or
Oh,
experience.
I gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Literally that
Yep.
simplistic. Some of the
Okay.
keep it simple, silly, right? The kiss.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you have to beautify that basic of it. But it's
That's
really
not how I
pushing
learned that
for
expression, but yeah,
I don't want to say the other word because I
you're a
don't want
kind man. I appreciate it.
to. But yeah, just acknowledging the time, the mindset, but really the support and encouragement. Because the other research that will tell you time and time again around resistance is, okay, maybe I do buy in, maybe you do that, and you didn't want the photos, but maybe you saw a couple of photos and you're buying into certain things, you're connecting, you're it's like having a little bit of fun. But Jerry, it still goes back to the things that a lot of us in the learning world have learned. And for those that are new to it, it's what's the transfer of learning? You have to embed that. And the more reinforcements you have post, whether it be through cohort model, checking in with
Right.
folks, having a
I agree.
follow-up session, you have to actually coach the most senior leaders all the way down to what is the transfer of learning. Jerry went to an event. What am I doing with him after? What am I doing with
Right.
him during? Am I protecting his time? And am I
Yeah.
encouraging his usage and the application of that?
Yeah.
And
There's
that's
not
the
near
biggest
enough of
thing.
that. There's not near.
There's
We all have
not.
to go these mountaintop things, and then
There's not.
I just came from one a few weeks ago, and I was like, this is awesome. Right. And if I thought about, but there was nothing that came after it. So,
Transfer of
um,
learning. I'm gonna put
Frank,
that in there. Yeah.
yeah, we've got just a couple minutes, and we've talked about ROI, so we're going to skip the ROI conversation because we have this listed as a superpower, and I truly believe it is learning to listen strategically. Um, we are terrible at listening. Most of it goes in one, out the other. Most of the time, people are talking, we're mostly thinking about what we're going to say, right? How do you learn to think strategically, and to do that you got to listen. So just a couple minutes on what we've got here, Frank, if
Mhm.
you would.
I'm still gonna go back to the data piece of it. Okay. Because folks in your most senior leadership are going to listen to data or
Yeah.
look at data. And so you still have to go beyond the surveys and you got to show how those qualitative and quantitative insights really inform transformation for your organization.
Hmm.
That listening will then drive the relevance and build trust with your leaders. And once you build trust, you and I know, unless you break it, you will be given that autonomy and freedom within the framework to really, really optimize and transform your organization. And that really incorporates those things. A good example, and I'll keep this brief, is where I try to keep my initial surveys, post surveys, small, and then I'll grow them. And I use Kirkpatrick's model still. Yes,
Hmm.
Kirkpatrick's model, level one, two, three, and four. Do you like it all the way till you apply it? But the
Right.
four questions I ask are: Did you like it? Because I want you to have fun. One through five. Did you learn something new? One through five. Five being the best. Can you apply this in your role, one through five? And then just an open feedback comment so that I can improve the design delivery of this learning culture we're trying to drive, right? The level beyond that when it comes to strategy is then how do I tie that into your organization? Whether it be customer retention, loyalty, sales, whether it be compliance and making sure that folks are, compliant, depending if you're in a regulatory industry, right? Or they're optimized from a customer experience and guest and loyalty and,
Right.
hospitality, whatever it may be. If you can link those two, whether you do it yourself or you partner with the right folks in your organization, now you're really driving something that not only leadership will listen to, but you're talking about strategy and being looked at as a strategy partner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Rob is digging what you're saying, right? Tracking with you.
No, thanks,
Right
Rob.
at level 3 or 4, and we still overlook them, right? And we don't encourage. And
Basics.
because
Yeah.
the further you go in Kirkpatrick, the harder it gets.
Yes.
It's hard to distill some of that stuff. I want to let's just skip ahead to sort of some of the summary takeaways here. Um, just you know, the L&D leader's role. Um, just a minute on that, Frank, and then what's the one step? What do you encourage? What's one step that you say, hey, everybody, do this? It's Wednesday. Or is it Tuesday? No, it's Wednesday. That's a sad thing. Um, what's one thing somebody can do the rest of the week or next week? So let's start with just summarize in your mind what's the leader's role in creating a learning culture?
Encouragement. That's my one word.
Interesting.
Encouragement is active, it's not support. Support is, yeah, Jerry, I support you. Go learn, do stuff. Help us as an
Yeah.
organization move forward. No, no. Encouragement is active. Jerry, I want you to be there and I want to learn everything that you learned from that workshop. Share it with our leadership team at the next meeting. Do this, do that. As a matter of fact, I found a long catalog of things that I'd love for you to do. What are your thoughts on it? That is
Yeah.
encouragement. That is a leader absolute both expectation you need to have of your leader, but also as a leader, expectation for yourself. The one
Yeah.
takeaway, simple, and I'll put this in the chat. Start with one team, one goal, and one habit. Create those relics, rituals, and routines so that you have a little bit of fun, but you actually make a strategic transformation of your organization, my friend. And you can do that with one simple action this week. And that's maybe
Just
just
identify
sharing
it and
something
then
they
follow
learned.
up on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. Frank, I really want to thank you for doing this. Just a couple of other things. Where you'll be sent a free learning course that we developed, right? It's a blueprint. It's how to prove your impact, how to cultivate trust. And then we have an upcoming webinar on it's in January. It's on strategic learning leadership development, and we're going to focus on things like how to teach conflict resolution and effective communication. And we've got some really cool guests, not quite as cool as you, Frank, but we have some good folks lined up. So, Frank, thank you so much for your time and for all of those of you who joined. Yeah, we really appreciate your time,
Thank
and
you.
let us know how we can be helpful, and look for the recording in the next day or two. We appreciate your time, and we wish you a good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much.
Be well. Be safe, my friends.
Good to see you, Frank.